What are your favourite robots from the black and white era? No, I didn't say augmented humans. So you've got mechanoids, chumblies, war machines. Yeah, throw in the servo bot, why not? And then you have, to be honest, I'm completely vexed as to what category these fellas actually come under. From what I can tell, given some of the explanations old Scruffy McTrouters gives throughout this story, these are kind of meant to be a chemistry set that got out of hand. Sort of, I think. Alright, story time with Chosen Chimp. When I was growing up, my main consumption of Doctor Who came from VHS. I'd scrimp and save for pre-recorded tapes and get some for Christmas and birthdays too. But one of my biggest sources was a friend of my dad's at work who would tape serials for us off of UK Gold. I specifically remember one such tape which had the Krotons and the Mind Robber. This was my first ever delve into the Patrick Troughton era. And whereas I'd go on to watch the Mind Robber front to back, side to side and top to bottom a million times over, and herald it to this very day as one of my all-time favourite classic Doctor Who stories, I only ever watched the Krotons once or twice, and hadn't watched it at all since, until I received a Patreon request to cover it, distinguished follower £1 a month. Until that time, the only thing that I could remember for some reason was this moment where a Kroton struggles almost drunkenly to pinpoint the TARDIS. Okay, it's, you gotta go on, there it is, okay, just go back and, no, you've gone too far, okay, stop, look, just, come on, there you go, stop, there, good. It is a moment that, in all fairness, kind of encapsulates the fact that the Krotons were troubled. Or should I say, the Krotons is troubled. Because I gave this serial the Chosen Chimp once over and I honestly don't know what to tell you. Here's Kroton, the Cyberman with a soul. No relation. Look, it might just be the subjective simian talking here, it probably is, but it seems to reside rather uncomfortably on the lesser end of charming black and white classic Doctor Who quality, when it probably could have been just a little bit better. This next point I can't emphasise enough. Nestled within all of this, the awkwardly inept robots and the squashed together gaggle of subjugated nitwits and the claustrophobically finite set of locations, is actually a very interesting sci-fi concept. And that kind of figures too because it was written by Robert Holmes, whose eventual contribution to the lore of Doctor Who in the classic era was nothing short of monumental. Krotons was his first ever Doctor Who writing gig, and a repolish of a story he originally came up with back in the Hartnell years. And seeing promise in what would eventually be known as the Krotons was a recently recruited Terence Dix, who previously worked as script editor on The Invasion. He would go on to edit the script for this story and then go on to become a certified don of Doctor Who script edits and target novelisations. And so, right here, is the early days of two essential contributors to the classic Doctor Who brand. And when you consider the concept of the Krotons, you quickly realise that this is a crystal clear example of good idea, not so good execution. And I'm certainly not saying that I don't like it. It's a pretty functional serial with a beginning and an end, and there is fun to be had. I enjoyed watching it for the purposes of this video at least, but it seems just lacking in a kind of charm that most other black and white stories, even the bad ones, automatically possess. I can't quite put my finger on it. For one thing, it was transmitted right after The Invasion, which is by no means a perfect serial, but still a bloody good one, and an epic, memorable game changer for Doctor Who with just about one of the most explosive and exciting finales in the history of Who up until that point. Audiences who went bananas over that back in 1968 would tune in 1 week later and it's gonz. This lot with their outfits. Maybe it's the general gullible wetness of these supporting characters that gets me, or perhaps it's the blandness of most of the visuals. A lot of the stuff is just kind of boring to look at, and not to be confused with minimalist. Case in point, the Time Lord scene in the War Games, which just works. Some of the Kroton tech is faintly Cybermanish looking, but just done on the cheap. And it's not the only thing that renders these mockbuster robotic villains. As for the Krotons themselves, I like the design up until a point, because I struggle with robots featuring cloth. And that also tracks because they were designed by Bobby Bartlett, who designed my favourite type of Cyberman. A solid and distinct creation ruined by the fact that the people building them made them too big, so the skirts were added to hide the legs of the actors. I can't help thinking that it would have been more fun to actually just see the legs. History also tells us that Terry Nation wanted to sell his Daleks over to the US so they could be developed into a different series entirely, and these were intended as the Doctor's principal nemesis? Really? That's what it says on Fandom, you're joking me, right? Well, it never came to fruition, so let's just forget that that was even considered. And so the Krotons is etched forever in Doctor Who history, but had it not been, I don't think the product would have suffered too much. But there you go. And it is at this point that I feel I must reiterate that if you hold the Krotons near and dear to your heart, I am not going to take that away from you. The whole point of watching Doctor Who is to have fun, and if you have accomplished that, then you win. Okay, I better make this one quick because it's windy. It's about to rain. Look at that. So, I enjoy watching interviews with Peter Capaldi on YouTube because I just love listening to him speak. I think he's great. And one of the interviews that I watched, he was talking about how he loved watching the classics when he was a child, and he made an extremely interesting point that I do on occasions think about with classic Doctor Who, but I think it's something that people do tend to forget, and that is the old episodes were only meant to be shown once, just once. They were never meant to be watched over and over again. And then he goes on to say about how the achievement of making those stories with what little money they had is an amazing feat unto itself. And particularly with his first point of these episodes only really being created for that one initial consumption is a very interesting thing to consider when you're watching classic Doctor Who, particularly the early black and white stories and the stories in the 70s. No recordings, no VHS. If you missed it, it was pretty much gone forever. And the only way that you could catch up was to read whatever novelizations were out at the time. So when you look at it that way, it's possible that I'm being a little harsh on my criticism of the Krotons. All things considered, was it really that bad? The answer is no. It's only really slightly inadequate when you place it alongside other classic Doctor Who stories that had the same strictures, because so many of them were so marvellous and so brilliantly put together, considering all the technicalities, that anything that falls below that standard is deemed inadequate. But perhaps that's unfair, and perhaps the Krotons does have that classic Doctor Who magic, if just for the fact that it existed, that they made it, that they made those crazy robots, that they had those actors and those characters, and Jamie and Zoe and the Doctor doing their thing. It was all there, and it all came together. And for many people, should I say, it must have been pure TV magic. So despite my criticisms, I feel at this point I must give credit where it's due. Krotons is cool when you look at it like that. Thanks to Owen for requesting that I review the Krotons over on Patreon.
Visit patreon.com/chosenchimp and become a distinguished follower for £1 a month, where you can request your classic Doctor Who story for review. Maybe just skim through the channel and make sure it's not one that I've done so already, and please no Dalek or Cybermen stories. I'm doing those already. It's the slow burn. I haven't forgotten about the Dalek thing, by the way. It's just taking a bit of time. I want to get it right, you know. So, yeah, please, your ongoing support on Patreon is appreciated, and I look forward to seeing you, more of you, there. Back to you, Studio Chimp.
Thanks, you sugary tart. So these are Gonds. This is Surlis, leader of the Gonds. He is announcing that Abu Gond and Varna Gond have been selected to be companions of the Krotons, much to the dismay of Farah Gond, who quite frankly has had enough of him and his people blindly following the overlords that they've never even seen. Oh, you Gonds, what are you like? Arriving on the scene and looking all tiny in this vast wasteland is the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe. We never really find out what this planet is other than that it's conveniently referred to as Planet Gond. It's got 2 suns though, there they are there. One looks like an egg. After trawling through the wasteland, umbrella in hand, they eventually stumble upon what the Doctor refers to as fascinating architecture, but what I'd prefer to call a spilt bag of dog treats. I mean, talk about minimum effort. Normally I gush at the models of the black and white era, but I struggle with this. Look at the city of Skaro compared to that. You can't just film a bunch of small triangles and call it a city. They look like weird clothes pegs. Anyway, at least it looks better closer up. Still not a Telos tomb by any stretch, but nice enough for my liking. And this right here is what being a companion of the Krotons really means. You come out with a fuzzy brain and then you get blown by a load of steam and then you're dead. Poor Abu Gond, he will be missed. When the Doctor tries to alert the locals to this problem, they get a hostile response, largely due to this joyless stick in the mud who for ages I thought looked really familiar, and then I found out he's also the warlord in the War Games. His name is Elek, and he's all about the Kroton way of life, for now at least, convincing Varna to stop listening to Farah's naysaying and don the robe of being with the Krotons. Jamie's got into a fight, no time wasting there, and getting the better of this hot-headed bumpkin Chesterton style. Look at their socks. And when the Gonds realise these travellers have been in the supposedly contaminated wasteland, they freak right out. But this is just one of the many lies fed to them by the Kroton overlords. And the Doctor wants to save that girl before she gets steamed on the other side. Their noble leader Surlis yells at them saying, "You can't. It's against the law of the Krotons." And nobody listens. The Doctor devises a plan, and what a genius plan it is. Simply block the gun mechanism with rocks and then... okay. Well saved by the umbrella then, the real star of the show, I think we can all agree. With Varna rescued and taking refuge in this hut, Surlis explains that no living person has ever seen the Krotons as they haven't come out of the machine for thousands of years. Thousands. And only now does one of them get suspicious. I'm hoping that the years are really short on this planet, maybe because of the 2 suns or something. You flipping Gonds. According to legends, silver men came out of the sky. They built a house among the Gonds. The Gonds attacked them, but the silver men caused the poisonous rain to fall, killing hundreds of people and turning the earth black. But then they made peace with them, and now the Gonds learn from them through the teaching machines. Well, okay, literally everything they have learned is from the teaching machines, and the teaching machines alone. These things here that look like faces. It doesn't exactly take much to convince Surlis that his whole life has been based on a fallacy. He pretty much realises the ridiculousness of it all as he's saying it. We've all been there. Speaking of fallacies, yeah. Even the custodian of the learning hall doesn't know what the Krotons look like, and only hears their voice. Farah has got anarchy on the brain and plans to lure the Krotons out by smashing the machines and have a great time doing it. At which point you get a first glimpse at the Krotons' highly sophisticated control room. Dials, monitors, buttons, all the trimmings. And this moving monitor device with... wait a minute. The letter X? Things being put in your brain? I know who's behind this. It's that bloody Elon Musk again. This is just the sort of thing he'd get up to as well. I can't believe this... okay, sorry, I got carried away. The Krotons generate this rather handsome mosaic of the Doctor, and then this probe thing comes out of the hole and just gets longer and longer. I'm sure we can all be mature here. As sizable appendages go, it's not the most intuitive. Make of that what you will. Because it's honing in on the Doctor's likeness, all the Doctor has to do is cover his face and it gets instantly confused. This brave young expendable fancies his chances, causing him to get reduced to nothing left but his sandy remains. And this one-eyed robot snake goes back into hiding because it thought it killed the right person, prompting the Doctor to call it a stupid machine. Well, it's very difficult to disagree with that. After more kicking off from Farah and the Krotons telling them to leave the learning hall in a booming voice, the Doctor leaves Jamie to medic duties while him and Zoe explore. Of particular interest to our favourite cosmic scarecrow is this trapdoor that apparently leads under the hall. Zoe stays up while the Doctor and Surlis go down and... she's found a computer. Here we go. Just for context, the last computer she interacted with, she tortured to death and laughed. So, what do we got here? Some sort of code or equation? Beats me. I don't even know what my washing machine is telling me half the time. Anyway, she does that to it, causing that gauge to go bonkers. Obviously, Zoe's ranked higher than any Gond, what with her time on the wheel, so she gets selected to be the next companion of the Krotons. Ah, hello. Do we not get to see what was down the hatch? Righty-ho. A machine on metal pillars, apparently. The Doctor describes a root structure down there, implying that this tech is organic, and the entire machine may be possibly alive. Don't worry, we'll get to see some of it later. Sort of. I still need to address my confusion on that. As the learning machine pumps Zoe's mind full of false praise for passing its test, the Doctor steps in and kicks off, insisting that he must now take the test so that Zoe doesn't have to suffer a terrible ordeal alone. After ballsing it up for the first time, he passes and almost falls for the same mind trick. Tell you what, he doesn't like being called Dr. Gond.
Class 3198 selected male Dr. Gond.
Dr. Gond. Idiots!
Into the machine they head, where mysteries inside await. There are even nice chairs for them. The Doctor has this idea for him and Zoe to hold a chain so that they can equalise the power load. I'll take his word for it. When the machine lights up, there's this ball of light, the same burning ball that Vara explains seeing over her head when she wakes up. The Doctor tells Zoe to relax, because the second Doctor's really good at that, and this object does a thing. Well, this doesn't look very fun. Because of the chain thing, everything goes bang, and then you get all of this weird trippy imagery. This honeycomb-looking surface, some bubbles there. Yeah, that's the 60s, kids. No wonder the Krotons call them high brains. Both Doctor and Zoe realise that these beings have a way of transferring mental power to pure energy, and that they were used to operate a thermal switch. The Doctor gets an empty bottle and fills it with liquid from the tank, identifying it as slurry, crystals in suspension, similar to the primeval soup of life beginning in the sea on our planet. And that's how the Krotons take shape, folks. Crystallization in a primordial bubble tank. See, as a concept, I think that is awesome. And from this angle, they appear to be a really credible threat. This angle, not quite so much. Having previously conditioned all the Gonds into submissiveness, they are surprised by the antics of Doctor and Zoe. They escape from the back at near enough the same time that Jamie breaks in at the front. I think it's really cool that you can see the Kroton's reflection in the wall while it sneaks up on Jamie. Was that intentional? Probably not. Anyway, they try the same thing on Jamie but fail to realise that he's not as smart. They interrogate him about the TARDIS and he hasn't got a flipping clue. So they target the TARDIS for dispersion, aka using the steam thing on it. Talking about the audio just for a minute, the Krotons do actually have some pretty cool incidental music. Whenever you see one, you hear this, which is a worthy match to the Cyber Wheelies. As for the voices of the Krotons themselves, I'm still trying to make up my mind whether I like how they speak or not. They got a kind of cool robot filter on their voices, but there's just a lot of bickering and...
They are not Gonds.
Why did you inoperate the dispersion unit? We need them alive. They have escaped. Keep the scanner on them. We will order the Gons to capture them and bring them back. That is not a Gon. It is possible they have evolved. There has not been time. It is a similar biped animal, but not from this planet. It is possible these higher anthropoids have taken over the planet. That is a Gond. These creatures are in alliance with the Gons. Let us take this one.
Yeah, it's definitely ears of the beholder for this one. Tell me what you think of the Krotons' voices. Drop it in the comments. Right then, so what are the Gonds up to? Well, Elex changed his tune. Typical Gond. He's advising this scientist to wage war with the Krotons, but more importantly, to obey him and not Surlis. Surlis thinks Elec is a fool for rushing into the fray. Instead, Surlis wants to play the long game fighting the Krotons, and perhaps even develop better weapons and attack them without them suspecting they're being attacked. But Elec wins public favour. That's the warlord that we know and love. The slightly bossier of the two Krotons sends the other one across the wasteland to track down the Doctor and Zoe, who have done a runner to the TARDIS. Look at him go there. His big bro is calling out vector coordinates to get him to the right place. They're obsessed with these high brains as they can give out more mental juice than any Gond they've tried to zap in the past. After, walking, I guess, it catches up with the Doctor and Zoe and orders them to return to the Dynatrope. Dynatrope is their ship, by the way, also known as the Machine. We'll get to that. Fortunately, Jamie tries to use a dispersion gun on the Kroton holding him captive, which doesn't really do anything, but it does distract it from acting as sat-nav, and it turns out this one doesn't for the life of it know what it's doing without his mate to guide him. It's only after the ruckus that he can lock onto the TARDIS and disperse it. And that's it. The TARDIS is gone, never to be seen in Doctor Who again. Can you imagine? Nah, the Doctor just activated the hostile action displacement system, which causes it to dematerialise if it's attacked. The Doctor rewards its good behaviour with...
Look, it's all right again!
Yes, what a stupid place to land.
What is wrong with him in this story? When Elec has finished laying out his crap plans, Surlis decides on something a little more strategic, attacking the Machine, aka the Dynatrope, from underneath. And here's the room beneath the hatch at last. He and his squad of Gons are using a big chain to yank one of the supporting legs away. And good news, it puts the whole Dynatrope out of balance, which makes the Krotons do that. You know, these guys are so bizarre. The more I chew into this video, the more I actually kinda want to root for them. Bad news is they're all standing underneath the structure while they're causing it to collapse, and that is a pretty big flaw in the plan. The Doctor gets rained on by rocks. Twice. Eventually the Krotons succeed in stabilising the Dynatrope, which in turn stabilises their weird heads, and if you're wondering what this Dynatrope Machine spaceship thing actually is, then here's a bit of it here. Just a bit, mind. It's kind of difficult to contextualise given this shot composition, and this is where I get a bit confused about the whole spaceship thing, like, okay, so the ceiling collapsed so now they can see it. That sort of makes sense, but I don't know, when you're at the top you got a front door there and a back door there, so is it built into this cavernous structure? But then you see this shot of it from the outside and I just don't know. I don't think the Gons know either. Elec exploits the disaster that was Surlis's plan. I mean, it could have worked if they just carried on pulling and made sure not to stand underneath it while it was falling. And seizes power, just as they finally get to see their first ever Kroton. It zaps this poor idiot just because Elec is asking too many questions. Why didn't they zap him? And then explain that they want the high brains of the Doctor and Zoe so that they can leave the planet. Elec, of course, has no issue ratting them out, and... Jamie, why are you squashed under a door? You can't take him anywhere. Go and make some acid with the chemist, and no, not that kind. The Doctor took some smelly, eggy sulphur from the wasteland and tells this guy to make it in bulk. According to science, sulphur makes sulphuric acid. Who knew? and don't dip your finger in it. I enjoy this mad scientist in a lab scene, but everyone's coughing because they're breathing in corrosive substances, and I don't think these masks are helping. Sorry, I'm just a bit worried about them. This plan is compromised as the bad Gons seize the Doctor and Zoe and take them to the Krotons again. But good old Surlis dives through the door in the nick of time to deliver the acid, before dying the dignified hero's death he deserves. It seems for a minute like they need to go on with the Krotons' plan because the Dynatrope will exhaust and the release of energy will destroy the planet. So in case you're wondering, the legend goes like this. The Dynatrope was part of a battle fleet. 2 of the Kroton crew were exhausted by enemy fire. They emergency landed on whatever this planet is called and put the Dynatrope in perpetual motion. They've been educating the locals to bring them up to adequate brain power so that they can use their brain energy to take off. All of these candidates were deemed inadequate and therefore rejected and dispersed. You know, how did the Gons actually live here for so long? Surlis said more than 1,000 years. Who knows what these creatures are? Elek's cowardly Gons run away and the brave ones stand their ground as the ship is set to do something. The Doctor and Zoe distract the Krotons by annoying the hell out of them while Zoe surreptitiously pours acid into the water tank, to which these tubes are connected, which are then plugged right into... oh boy. The Krotons melt, their ship melts, everything melts. And that's chemistry for you folks. Here's the takeaway science lesson of this story. Don't do any of this. So that is that. So long, gang. Where are you to next? Ah yeah, Seeds of Death. Less acid, more ice. Well, good luck with that. Meanwhile, the liberated Gons are now free to find their own answers to the big questions in life, with the only loose end being to deal with Elek and his goons, which you never actually see, and I for one find that deeply unsatisfying. I'd like to have seen what fate befell this glowering monkey. Oh well, at least we have this.
Stop it! Stop the light!
Doctor Who and the Krotons. Or should it have been called Doctor Who and the Crystal Buffoons? They weren't really the smartest of villains, were they? But then again, the Daleks and the Cybermen weren't always either. Gosh, it's ever so windy, isn't it? Very, very windy. Do you know what? I think for all their ineptitude, for all their inability to do things properly and to carry out their schemes of just trying to escape from a planet, there is another way that you can look at the Krotons. You could look at these villains as 3-dimensional. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Krotons? Sound off in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a good one.